I would like to give a very warm STA welcome to Stephen and Ricky, who join us from Calba and have probably taken reams of people in Scotland through Agile training, and I'm one of them. So a big thank you for that. Yeah, no, great to have you here with us today. So guys, the idea is this session is as interactive as we can make it. There is a mirror board link in the chat, so try and join that while the guys get started. But thank you guys, really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Joanna. A pleasure. I'm looking forward to sharing some Agile experiences and Agile learnings with yourselves. So yeah, so we've got what I think an hour for lunch for this lunchtime session. So we're just going to dive straight into it. So everybody's got a link to Miro. If you go to the Miro board, you'll see what you can see there is what is Agile. Yeah. So I think given the size we're going to actually split into sort of two small groups. Now, if anyone else joins, I can add them into our room. But for the next 6 minutes, what I'd like you to do, and once you get into your group, is have a chat with your other colleagues in the group, and just there's no right and wrong answer here. What do you think Agile is? You know, what are your perceptions of what Agile is in terms of behaviors, characteristics? You know, what do you believe what Agile is in terms of if you were to say an Agile team versus a non-Agile team? What behaviors or characteristics do you think that Agile team would be displaying? Yeah, so have a think about these in your group, and then you'll see on the left-hand side of the Miro board there's a bunch of stickies. In your group, grab a sticky, and as I'm just doing it right now, so if in your group you think one of the things you're going to put on here is that you think Agile is something, just write it on the sticky and put it on there. So, and again, there's no right or wrong answer here, so you probably don't want, you know, go berserk with the stickies, but we're looking maybe for 5 or 6-ish kind of key characteristics, behaviors that you think that you believe Agile is in your group, and then just place them onto the board there, and then after the 6 minutes is up, we'll all come back into the room here, and we'll have a chat about what we've come up with.
Oh wow, where did all these people come from? Fantastic, hello.
I don't know, but welcome.
Quite a good lobby.
Cool.
Welcome back.
Oh, I like that. Music and a finishing chime.
Do you use Miro or Miro at all much at Scottish Tech Army or whiteboarding? I don't know if you're, yeah.
I've used it before, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, great. So thanks everybody for hello folks who've just joined recently. Welcome to the session. So I'm Stephen McKench. I'm a Agile coach and trainer with Calba. So what we've done in the last 6 minutes roughly is everybody's put down some perceptions or some thoughts of what they think Agile is. So is everybody on Miro? Is everybody needing it? We'll put it back in the chat again. Ricky, maybe just the link if anybody's not got that.
If you could, Stephen, that'd be great. Thanks.
Great. Okay, so on that link there, you can see the board. What I might do, I might just share my screen here so we can talk through the points together. Might be a good idea. So I was going to. Okay. So on the share screen, you should be able to see if you haven't got access to Miro, you should be able to see that now. Yep. So what we've got here, let's see if we've got anything that's kind of common. We've got responsive to customer needs, Continuous If anybody sees anything that think that's about trust the process, open and honest. Okay. Well suited to tester and development. That's good. Inspection and adapt. Yeah. I think somebody's managed to lock that one somehow. Okay. Come back to later. And we've got continuous review of progress, cooperative with team stakeholders. This is a good one, breaking down small atomic units. Empirical. So let's just take this one, empirical. So does anybody know what we mean by empirical process? So the team that put up empirical there, what do you mean by empirical?
It's when you're learning from experience, you can have the continuous learning.
Absolutely. So Agile is basically, a lot of the Agile frameworks and methodologies is based on empirical processes. So we're constantly, back to that our point there, inspection and adapt. So something we call the three towers of the empirical process: inspect and adapt, and transparency. We're constantly trying something out, constantly experimenting, and learning from the results there. So we've got a constant sort of cycle going on, the empirical process, where we don't always know the answers, but let's try something out, get some feedback, and then we maybe adapt it and try it again. So empirical process, as opposed to a defined process. So, and generally, waterfall software development can be broadly thought about as being a defined process. We've got defined phases: analyze, then design, then sort of build, test, release. Quite large phases. With an empirical process, it's much more evolutionary. We don't always know the answers. We're going to try something out. We've got a hypothesis. Let's try this out, get some feedback, and adapt from there. Yeah. So Agile is very much more on an empirical process basis. Yeah. Okay. And quite different from that, we've got open and honest and trust the process. Good one. So how does that play into the Agile space? Any comments on that one? So why do folks put that up there? Any background or any thoughts on why that was put up there?
I put that one. It's down because I also put the one about doing it in small atomic units. So you do small amount of work, and then you go back to your backlog, and the priorities of that could change, or something new could come along, and basically you can respond quickly within a shorter time frame than you would if you were doing like a big 6-month waterfall project.
Yeah, so very much back to some of the points here about the work is broken. I think also I saw here responsive to customer needs, continuous review of progress, and prioritizing delivery of code throughout the project. So certainly another key aspect of Agile is just embracing that change is going to happen. We don't know all the answers to things. The best way to learn is to try something out. So you might sometimes hear in Agile speak, you talk about sometimes fail fast or learn fast. The best way to learn is to try something out, get experience from that, and then we inspect and adapt. Again, when we do this, it's a natural learning process, as we as humans have learned by making mistakes in our throughout our whole life. And that's what, again, the Agile sort of approach, the Agile mindset, is that we're going to learn by doing. So we want to sort of deliver things quicker. So one of the key things with Agile is to get early feedback. So breaking things down to small atomic units or small chunks is a key aspect of that. And if we get time, we'll actually do a little exercise to sort of test that out to see what effects it has. The other bit there is so their continuous delivery. So we're looking to deliver not just one big release, so to speak, or one big kind of shipment, but we're using continuous delivery, so do things in small chunks on an ongoing basis. And it's also, yeah.
Stephen, just to add to that, I think, well, we're talking about testing and maybe testing, people think it's testing of software. You're actually really testing of ideas, testing your hypothesis for your business idea as well. And then obviously making sure that what your idea is fit for purpose, fit for market. And then if it's not, you're adapting to changing to that as well. Just want to add to that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's Agile doesn't have to be used for doing software development, really. It's used these days. It's used a much broader. It can be for any kind of type of a project or product development. But the key principle of Agile is we're getting feedback early and at multiple levels. So absolutely, we're the hypothesis we might do could be testing perhaps a new concept that we might not really know how the market is going to react to it. Let's try and do something small, test it out, get some feedback, and then we adapt from there. I saw a thing in the middle of the board there about as well suited to test-driven development. That test-driven development is one of the techniques we use in Agile software development, which we'll come on to. But yeah, I think overall we've got some of the key things there. One of the key ones is responsive to customer needs. So that's again back to I think maybe your point, Chris, about making sure we're understanding what our customer needs are, testing that out, getting feedback on it. And yeah, we've got a bit of stuff about people here, being open and honest, trusting the process, cooperation. So yeah, overall, it's got some good points here that are all relevant to Agile. So does anybody know where Agile is in this context, where it came from? I mean, you know where it started from at all?
Actually, I don't. This is a whole new thing for me. So I would love to hear. I was sat here thinking, where did it come from? Whose idea was this thing? So I'd love to hear that, Stephen. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump to some slides now. Just a wee bit of a touching on where did Agile actually sort of where's its roots, etc. So I guess it did come from a software development context. And way back, I guess in the late 80s, 90s, there was what they generally coined as a software crisis, where there's lots of software development projects that were over budget, not delivering what they're expected of them, and massively late. And generally speaking, software development at that point in time was going through a more traditional waterfall type approach, more phased, defined process. There was a group of other people out there that are trying to do something a bit different with software development. They use a more incremental, iterative kind of approach to developing software, and ultimately there was a number of different sort of leaders in this space. They came together back in 2001 in the US, funny enough, in a ski resort. And what they came out of that little forum they had, that little group over some days, was they came out with this thing they called the Agile Manifesto for software development. And that was like a common theme that they felt that their different approaches to developing software was kind of if you like, reflecting what the shared values they had across these different approaches. And so that came what is now called the Agile Manifesto. And there's now different variations of the Agile Manifesto. It's not just for software, and it's used in different contexts. But what we've got on the screen here, and you again go to the link there, it's still there. This is the kind of 4 value statements that came out with back then. And this spun off the whole Agile, if you like, movement we know of today. So the first thing there, back to the Miro boards, it's kind of really interesting that some people put open and honest and trusting the process there and cooperation, is that what the first thing they put out there was that what they value the most is individuals and interactions over a process and tools. So ultimately what they're saying there is that what's really valuable is the people. The people in the teams, the individuals and the interactions, the collaboration they have is more valuable than following a process, or more valuable than using a certain tool, etc. Not to say process and tools are not important, and they're quite clear to say there is value on the things on the right. So Agile is not about ditching process, ditching documentation, ditching plans, and just doing what some people refer to as cowboy coding and stuff. It's not that. It's still very much recognizing there is value with plans, documentation, process, and tools. And if you like, Scrum, a very popular Agile framework, is to all intents is a bit of a process. You probably came across tools like Jira, etc., that are used in a lot of Agile teams. But what they're really saying here is that, yeah, we've got Scrum, we've got Kanban, we've got Jira, we've got all these great tools out there, but what's really important is the people, is the individuals, the interactions they have. Now, been involved in a number of Agile sort of transformations and Agile teams. This key point is quite commonly forgotten in some organizations that are moving to Agile. They sometimes get caught up in the process. How are we following Scrum? Should we use Scaled Agile framework? Should we use Dsdm? Should we use this framework or that framework, or this process? What about these tools? They get caught up in the process and tools side. And really what we're saying here from the start with Agile Manifesto, it's about people. It's about building trust in the team, having an open and honest environment, as you put on the Miro board there. So you're bang on when you're saying what is Agile. Open, honesty, trust, absolutely key behaviors and characteristics. If we don't have that, Agile is going to struggle in an organization if we don't have these key behaviors. So that was spot on with what you put on the Miro board there. Yeah. The other part we've got in the manifesto is working software over documentation. What that's ultimately saying is that we focus on delivering value, we're delivering product over creating lots of interim documentation. So again, reflecting in your points in the Miro board there about continuous delivery, prioritizing delivery, etc., of working code. We want to focus on delivering value, and ideally early and continuously. Customer collaboration is another key part of the Agile Manifesto. So who is our customer? How can we collaborate, interact with them very closely? Typically that's done in a lot of Agile teams. They have what we call the product owner role, or the PO. Somebody who's representing or is the customer or representing customer needs, and they need to be working very closely with the team to help make sure the team ultimately are delivering what they need, what the customer needs. That's quite a challenging role in itself, and it's a very quick summary of that, but that's one part of what makes Agile work well. Another part there on the manifesto is responding to change. We embrace change. We expect change to happen. Yes, we still have plans. We have a vision statement in Agile. We have a roadmap, horizon or release plans, and we have sprints in Scrum. We've got 2-week, 3-week plans and daily plans, etc. So still quite a lot of planning goes on in Agile, but ultimately we expect change to happen. We're embracing change. We adapt to change as we go forward. Okay. So looking at what you had on the Miro board there, you had a lot of the key parts of this. So that's great. So you've got a good understanding, I think, of what I've seen so far in the Miro board of what Agile is, the important stuff. Good. Moving on. So it's good. Putting it in practice is a different ballgame, though. Yeah. So I'm going to move on. So this is the 4 value statements. We've also got part of the manifesto there's 12 Agile principles. I'm not going to go through all of them. We've got this recorded, so you can see the 12 points later on. And again, this is on the website the link was on the previous slide. But again, the first one there, the highest priority in an Agile team is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of value. Just on that one, sounds simple, doesn't it? Any challenge? What do you see the challenges in delivering that first principle?
Value is subjective, I suppose, isn't it?
Yep. Anything else?
Customers don't always know what they want, so that being able to articulate what you're after comes through having a firmer idea yourself what you're after, and that's, you sometimes have an idea but you're not ready to articulate it at the same point in time.
I think one aspect is being able to deliver something that, albeit a limited scope, works in its entirety. So I guess a lot of people will have seen the famous cartoon of, you know, how to do agile development, about, you know, you start with build a skateboard, then a scooter, then a bicycle, you know, then the car, as opposed to, right, an axle, the other axle, you know, which wouldn't in itself work.
Yeah, so some of the things you touched on there, yeah, absolutely, it's difficult. And back to the Kirsty's point initially about, you know, value is subjective. So who makes the call about that this is more valuable than that? You know, who makes that decision? And how do they make that decision? How do you actually measure value? That whole area of, you know, trying to decide what's more valuable, what's higher priority, is very difficult, and that gets into what Jimmy called the product ownership space. The product owner in an Agile team typically has got that responsibility of deciding what is most important. And to be able to do that, you need to have a very clear vision of what they're trying to do in the first place, and how does that contribute to the organizations like Scottish Tech Army's goals overall. So, you know, what's the goals of our organization, and this project or this product I'm developing, how does that fit into the wider goals, which helps me as a product owner prioritize what I do next, basically what's most valuable. That in itself is a very hard piece to get right in lots of organizations. And in some organizations, the customer, there's multiple customers. There's end users, there's also internal stakeholders. And some organizations have got compliance requirements to meet as well, security requirements. We've got lots of different stakeholders. So back to one of the points in the Miro board about cooperation within a team and the stakeholders. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of cooperation, collaboration needs to go on with sometimes quite a wide range of stakeholders. And again, that's largely the product owner role is involved in that. So it sounds simple, that one principle there, but it's actually to make it happen in practice, it's a bit more to it. So our principles there, I think we've already touched on some of them. We accept change, we're delivering frequently, team working together, building teams with trust. Ideally, we're having face-to-face conversations. We're not able to do that in person these days, but in any Agile teams in a virtual environment using Zoom lots or other tools like this, a lot of time, I don't know if you're using Teams within Scottish Tech Army or other tools, but there's a high degree of collaboration goes on. There's other points there on the principles. Again, some of the key things here, we're trying to make things simple. So again, thinking about what's the simplest approach to delivering some work. You know, trying to reduce complexity. Almost something's challenging. Why are we doing this? If you don't know why we're doing it, you know, why are we doing it? What's the value in doing certain activities? So in some organizations, there's been maybe a bit of legacy or history, or we've got to do this at this step and this step and this step, and fill in this form and send this to this department. With Agile, we're sort of looking at, well, constructively sort of challenging ourselves. Well, what's the value in doing that? Is that adding value to our vision statement? So we're trying to keep things as simple as possible. Okay, and the final point there is about at regular intervals we reflect. We do what we call our retrospective, where we can actually look at how we're working and back to this continuous improvement. So again, some of the points you had on the Miro board about continuous review of progress. This kind of gets a little bit into retrospective, where we're actually every, in Scrum, approximately every 2 weeks, the team is sharing what they've delivered in the last 2 weeks, getting feedback on that, but also looking at themselves and how do we actually perform as a team over that 2 weeks, and what things can we do to perform better as a team. So lots of regular reviews and reflection goes on as well. Okay, we've touched on quite a few things there. Hopefully that's given you a bit of an idea. In practice, what we have today, Agile has grown massively. When I first got involved in a first sort of large Agile transformation, probably about 13, 14 years ago, the whole role of a Scrum Master was really unheard of, and using Scrum itself was we're kind of almost piloting that. Now it's Agile's kind of a very kind of common buzzword thrown around. There's lots of Agile this and Agile that. Lots of frameworks have evolved now. We've got some very well known ones, Scrum, Kanban, probably heard of them before. But then we've got other ones, things like Safe, Dsdm, Less, and so on. There's quite a wide range of frameworks and practices and techniques out there these days. And TDD, test-driven development, that was one of the ones we had in the Miro board. That's typically used again by software development teams, but the whole principle with TDD is to test early, if you like. Test early as early as possible to get feedback early. So back to the whole principle about getting feedback early is really important, and something that can be applied across any domain. It doesn't have to be just for software.
That was a question there, Stephen, about what's
Yep.
Dsdm.
Okay, so Dsdm is one of the earlier Agile frameworks that came out, dynamic systems development methodology. So that's been around. That's actually came out of the UK, and that is one that is still around these days. It's now sort of managed by something called the Agile Business Consortium, ABC, and some people might have been on Agile PM training. That's likely to have been teaching the Dsdm framework. But along with Dsdm, Safe, the Scaled Agile framework, Less, large-scale Scrum, Scrum at Scale, DAD is Disciplined Agile Delivery. They're all out there. It's become a bit more commercialized now. There's all different organizations there. They've got their own take on how we might want to scale or use Agile in a larger organization. And they've all got their kind of different slants on what they think is the best approach there. None are right. And my, our view at Calba is that the best approach is to grow your own, is to define, Scottish Tech Army's approach to Agile within how it's used at Scottish Tech Army. Yes, you might leverage from Safe, Dsdm, Less, you might sort of cherry pick bits of them, but what's really important is to get it right for yourselves. So some organizations, it seems like an easy option. Yeah, we're just going to use Dsdm, we're just going to use Safe, we'll just use Less, and end up getting into, to be honest, to get into more problems, end up getting tied up in knots about the process or the tools. Like how does Safe tell us how we're going to do it? And that's, in my view, that's not the right way around. It's like, well, what do we need to do as an organization? And let's use different best practices out there to actually develop our way of using Agile. So on the left of the umbrella there, we've got more of these kind of larger frameworks, something called scaling frameworks. On the right is more techniques. So extreme programming, best practice for developing software, test-driven development, behavior-driven developments, BDD, and then the two probably most widely used and known Agile frameworks, Scrum and Kanban. So just to touch on Scrum a little bit, I'm conscious of time. We're okay, I'm just wanting to leave time for questions as well. So I'm planning the session is going to end at 1. That's what the time box I've got. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about Scrum and Kanban. Then I'll show the slide that Alistair has already talked about, and then we'll go into questions. Okay, so Scrum is the most widely used Agile framework, and this is a kind of very simple diagram that's out there. There's lots of different diagrams out there about Scrum, but ultimately, a lot of organizations that are using Agile, I think it's over 75% of them are using Scrum or some variant of it. So this is where we have terminology such as the product backlog, sprints, daily Scrum meeting, or daily stand-up, sometimes it's called, the product owner role, Scrum Master role, etc. This is where it all comes from, is Scrum. There's a very simple, if you just Google search the Scrum Guide, or if you just go to scrum.org, you can download the Scrum Guide, and it gives you an overview of Scrum and a bit more detail about it. Okay. The other one out there is a Kanban. So Kanban has been around way before Agile came around, and way back when I first started, my first day in a job was with Hewlett Packard out at South Queensferry, talking to the late 80s. Now, my first day in a job was shown a Kanban system. That was a manufacturing Kanban. So HP at South Queensferry had a complete end-to-end research and development right through to manufacturing and shipment process for high-tech test equipment. And what was being shown in their Kanban system was a manufacturing Kanban where they're using basically buckets on the wall and columns to actually flow material through to the factory. And it was a visual representation of material flow. And that's what Kanban, Japanese term, translates to, is visual card or visual signal. It's a way to visualize a flow. So in the Agile context, and certainly in software development, but in other domains as well, Kanban is just a technique to actually visualize your work in progress, typically done by drawing some swim lanes or columns on a wall or a board such as Trello, and we are visualizing the work in progress. So every item will be a ticket, and it's flowing left to right. One of the key things with Kanban, though, is we have WIP limits, work in progress limits, where we say, let's not just have too much stuff going on. So let's control the amount of work we're working on at any one time, a work in progress limit. And the idea with that overall is that we are trying to stop starting and start finishing. So we want to break things down to small chunks, back to one of the key points that we had back on the Miro board there, break things into small chunks and flow them through into our, if you like, a deploy or done column. Taking on too many tasks at the same time is generally viewed as not as productive. If we have too much work in progress, we have a lot of context switching, we can create bottlenecks, and it's not as efficient to break things down to small chunks and flow it through. Yeah. So one of the key concepts in Agile is breaking things down to small chunks, and that is so we can deliver value early. Yeah, we break things down small, deliver it, we get feedback early, and so on. So Kanban boards are used. They're actually used as part of Scrum as well. They're used as a way to visualize our flow. Yeah. Okay. So it's a bit of a whirlwind tour on stuff, covering in an hour. Typically would take a couple of days to go through all this in a bit more detail. But just to finish up on really, Agile product development. So Alistair's already talked about this slide. Here's a classic diagram from Henrik Niebarg, where he talks about Agile product development is like the bottom bit. We start off with something, what we generally call our minimal viable product, or MVP, or our first release. Something, release one, if you like, is a skateboard. It's not brilliant, but it gets us from A to B, and it's delivering value. It's got some value behind it. We can actually get from A to B, whereas a wheel isn't really going to help us much. And what we then do from that skateboard, that MVP, we then iterate and evolve in it, and inspect and adapt, and build it up as we go forward. So we then do some testing with that skateboard and find out, you know what, it'd be handy to have a set of handlebars and make it a bit more easier to use the skateboard. Great, let's get the handlebars. And in fact, we can actually go faster by actually having two bigger wheels, and so we evolve our product as we go forward based on feedback as we go forward. Yeah. Okay. I think enough talking for myself. I'm going to open up to last 10 minutes for questions. Fire away.
Thanks very much, Stephen. As you say, whirlwind tour, but you've given some really useful overview there. Thank you. Obviously, in the environment within the tech army, it's different from a commercial environment where you've got a team that is employed full time to work on projects. So we've got people who are working on projects who've got differing amounts of time available in total, and potentially varying over time. Obviously we're much more accustomed to the idea of people working remotely and not in a face-to-face environment now. But any kind of observations on that sort of scenario where you've got differing availability of team members and any kind of tools or techniques or whatever to try and optimize that?
Yeah, so quite often when we have a team that's got quite the team members might be quite variable in terms of their availability, etc. Using Scrum as a kind of the Agile framework can be sometimes a bit challenging there. Typically with Scrum, most teams are using Scrum to look at in 2-week windows. So if that upcoming 2-week window, we're not entirely sure who's going to be around or what their availability is going to be during that 2-week window, then it gets a very bit harder to actually plan what we might be doing during that 2 weeks. Now that may or may not be the case with the teams you've got at Scottish Tech Army, but typically Kanban doesn't have that, if you like, that time boxing requirement. With Kanban, it's much more flexible. There's no time boxing involved. If you're using just, if you like, pure Kanban, it's much more open to the fact, well, you know what, if there's team members that are just not available, things just don't move on the board. So Kanban is much more, most of the teams that are using Kanban, pure Kanban, are probably more teams where have got a bit more sort of volatility in their team members, and also volatility and requirements coming in. So Kanban is something that's quite often used by what we generally call BAU teams that are dealing with support desks, teams maintaining current products that are in production, where they might have a very high priority task that comes in that has to shoot through the system. Yeah. Joanna, you got a question there, I think?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting that you say that. So we're using Kanban with one of the projects for exactly the reasons you've outlined, the uncertainty with resources. And what kind of good techniques have you seen though about injecting pace? So the flexibility of availability is absolutely accommodated by that setup, but urgency isn't in the same level of focus as it is with a sprint, basically. Have you seen good techniques to kind of still get that momentum whilst reflecting the reality of a sort of flexible resource base?
Yeah, I think so. I guess with Scrum, with sprints, we've got this notion of the sprint goal. So here's our sprint goal for the next 2 weeks. Here's what we're trying to achieve, and that does, give the team a bit of focus. So I think when Kanban, it sometimes can start to lose that focus element. So one sort of, it's kind of called Scrumban to a certain extent, and it's a kind of middle ground between sort of Scrum and Kanban, where we're not applying the same rigors of the Scrum framework precisely, but we're going to sort of pick some parts of the Scrum that might be useful, and that's one of the key things is, we've got a bunch of work going on. What is, back to that whole prioritization, what is a top priority? What is the theme we're trying to focus on over, over this kind of a month, perhaps, if you take a, some sort of period in time, and making that very visible. So it's amazing sometimes in teams, how quickly we actually go around individual team members and ask the team, well, why does this project exist? What is the key thing you're trying to deliver right now? And what's this project all about? Sometimes it's quite interesting how on teams that have been in place for some time, you get quite different opinions from individual team members about what the team or the project's all about. So one of the key things to try and keep that focus, I find, is having a very clear, succinct vision statement about what we're trying to do here and why. What is our vision, and having that very visible. And back to the whole thing about testing continuously, testing that out with the team continuously. So asking people, quite often, does everybody still understand this vision statement? Has anybody got any questions on it? Does this make sense? And making sure we're all still literally on the same page, so to speak. And that can be a broader sense, but also we then start breaking that down. We might have the top level vision, but how does it relate to, the next 3 months, our horizon plan? So what's on the horizon? What we're trying to do, say, next 3 months, what's that horizon plan? And then that kind of sometimes can give a bit more back to focus. With Scrum, there's a lot of focus sometimes, and in our way, we're only focused on the next 2 weeks, and we're losing sight of what the horizon is. With Kanban, it can be a little bit more loose and focus entirely. But I think if you think about vision statement, horizon plan, it can start bring it in a bit more. Hope that answers your question. So I think somebody else had their hand up.
There's a couple of things in the chat from David and Magda. I don't know if David wants to ask, or if I could just read it out from her.
Can you read it? I'm on the phone and I can't find the chat again.
Oh, of course, yeah, that's fine. Yes, is there any tips on transforming a traditional tech team into a way of working with Agile?
Any tips? Wow, where do we start with that one? Depends how embedded they are in traditional ways of working. I guess ultimately it does start with the people. So one of the things I've found is sometimes with some traditional tech teams is that everybody prefers to working a little bit in their silo sometimes. Just give me my task and I'll get on with my tasks. And once I've done my task, I'll report back, kind of thing. So one of the key things we're trying to do Agile is to say that a team is multi-skilled. It's about the team delivering value. So the daily, even if you're using Kanban, having that daily, what's called a daily scrum or a daily stand-up, having that daily meeting with a team and start to sort of say, be a bit more open about who's working on what today. How does this relate to our vision, our goal, what we're trying to focus on, and we got any blockers, and how can I help with that? And some things pairing up, it's not always simple to do, but pairing up amongst team, I think is something's a great way to knowledge share and reduce that whole only Bob can do that task. Well, if we get a situation where only Bob can do that task, that's a bottleneck. That's a potential area that's going to slow us down in the future. So what we should be doing, if only Bob can do that task, is like Bob and Jane should get together and work on that together for the next few days. So Jane gets some learnings and some knowledge. So in the future, hopefully Jane or Bob can do that task. So I think, a traditional tech team, trying to get into that more collaborative way of working would be my kind of first protocol, I think. And just, we've got a couple of minutes there, just so Magda's point there. Yeah, I think Magda, you've any other questions, Magda, on what you mentioned there, or was more sharing your experience there?
Actually, kind of to answer, comment on what Joanna was saying about working with Kanban and how do you then get sort of a momentum going with the team. And with the team that I was part of just now, kind of working with Scrum, but also kind of in a Kanban way, that worked well for us because we could plan the work for the sprint, which was 2 weeks for us. But at the same time, put this WIP limit on ourselves and kind of keep the conversation going between all the team members and then the stakeholders.
Yeah, absolutely. A sign of a good, healthy, agile team is where there's a lot of conversation, a lot of collaboration going on. So anything we can do to keep that conversations going is definitely the right way to go. And certainly in a virtual setting these days, it becomes more challenging to make that happen. And it takes a bit of a sometimes the role of the Scrum Master and the team is to facilitate that happening. So having the daily kind of Scrum or daily call, but also during the day is making sure people are talking to each other and sometimes bringing people together and let's have a chat about this with whoever else and getting the team together throughout the day, not just once a day. Yeah. Great. Well, I'm happy to hang on with any more questions. I'm okay to hang on, but if you've still got other things, I know we're scheduled to 1 o'clock. You got other things you got to go to. That's all good, like lunch, but or whatever. But yeah.
That was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Stephen, for your time. A really good walk around a lot of the kind of principles. I think, Chris, you look like you've got your hand up. Is that a question or a thank you?
No, it was a thank you, just and a clap as well to Stephen.
Thanks.
It's good to see Stephen again.
Yeah, it's been a few years, Chris. Yeah,
yeah, it has been.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Stephen. Really interesting session. Thank you. Really appreciate your time.
Pleasure, and
we'll
happy
see if
to
we can lure you back.
Yeah, any other questions? give me a shout, and happy to have a chat. No problem at all.
Brilliant, and thank you, Ricky, for your time as well. Appreciate it.
Not a problem.
Great.
Brilliant.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon.
You. Take care now. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.